The soft hum of Colony Station Epsilon 7's life support systems had become Kai Yensen's lullaby over the past 18 months. As a terraforming engineer, he'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of mechanical breathing that kept their small outpost alive on this desolate world. What he hadn't grown accustomed to was waking up to find someone sitting in his quarters at 3 in the morning. Kai's eyes snapped open, his body instantly alert despite the grogginess that clung to his mind. In the dim blue glow of his environmental controls, a silhouette sat perfectly still in the chair beside his desk. The figure was unmistakably feminine, with an otherworldly grace that made his breath catch. "Vesa?" His voice came out rougher than intended as he sat up, the standard issue blanket falling away from his bare chest. "What are you doing here?" The Etherian scientist turned her head toward him with fluid precision. Even in the low light, her luminescent skin seemed to pulse with an inner radiance, and her large, violet eyes held an intensity that made his heart race. Her silver hair cascaded over her shoulders like liquid starlight, and when she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality that had fascinated him since their first meeting 6 months ago. "I have been watching you sleep," she said simply, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Kai's mind struggled to process this. In all their interactions, formal briefings about human behavioral patterns, clinical discussions about colony adaptation, sterile data exchanges, Vesa had never so much as lingered after their scheduled meetings. She was professional to a fault, almost cold in her scientific detachment. The Etherian observation corps had strict protocols about maintaining distance from their subjects. He ran a hand through his dark hair, trying to find the right words. "Vesa, that's not appropriate. We have boundaries for a reason." She tilted her head, studying him with those mesmerizing eyes. "I am aware of the protocols, Kai Yensen. I helped write them." The way she said his name, with that slight emphasis on each syllable, sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. He'd always been attracted to her. What human wouldn't be, faced with her ethereal beauty? But he'd buried those feelings deep, knowing they were impossible and inappropriate. "Then why are you here?" he asked, pulling the blanket higher as he became acutely aware of her gaze on his exposed skin. Vesa stood with that characteristic fluid grace of her people, her tall frame elegant in a form-fitting suit that seemed to shimmer in the low light. She moved closer to his bed, and Kai caught the faint scent that always surrounded her, something like ozone and starflowers. "You're the reason I came to this planet," she said softly, her words barely above a whisper. The statement hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "When the observation corps issued assignments for human colony studies, I specifically requested Station Epsilon 7. Her eyes never left his face, searching for something he couldn't identify. "I requested you." Kai's mouth went dry. The implications of her words raced through his mind. Etherian scientists were assigned to human colonies randomly, part of a cultural exchange program that had been in place for decades. The idea that she'd chosen to come here, chosen to study him specifically, turned everything he thought he knew upside down. "That's impossible," he managed. "The assignments are random. You told me yourself that you'd never worked with humans before." A strange expression crossed her features, something almost like pain. "I have never worked with humans before. But I have seen your face, Kai Yensen. I have seen it in dreams that feel more real than waking." The room seemed to shrink around them as she moved even closer. He could see the subtle play of light beneath her translucent skin, the way her breathing had quickened. There was something almost desperate in her expression now, a crack in her usual composed demeanor. "I don't understand," he said, though part of him was beginning to suspect this was bigger than either of them had imagined. Vesa reached out as if to touch his face, then caught herself, her hand hovering inches from his cheek. "Neither do but I know that from the moment I saw your image in the colony files, I could not rest. I could not focus on anything else. My people, we do not feel as humans do. We observe. We analyze. We remain detached. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. You have made me feel. The weight of her confession hung between them in the recycled air of his small quarters. Kai found himself leaning toward her, drawn by an invisible force he couldn't name. Her hand was still suspended between them, trembling slightly, the first truly human gesture he'd ever seen from her. Vesa, he breathed, and something in his voice made her violet eyes widen. But before either of them could move, the soft chime of the morning shift change echoed through the station's corridors. Reality crashed back over them like a cold wave, and Vesa stepped back abruptly, her composed mask sliding back into place. I should not have come here, she said, but her eyes remained fixed on his face. I should not have told you these things. Wait, Kai called as she moved toward the door, but she was already gone, leaving only the faint scent of starflowers and the echo of impossible words. You're the reason I came to this planet. As the door sealed behind her, Kai fell back against his pillows, his heart pounding. Whatever had just happened between them, whatever force had drawn her to his room in the middle of the night, he knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. The research archives of Colony Station Epsilon 7 hadn't seen this much activity in months. Kai hunched over the terminal in the isolated corner of the data center, scrolling through classified files about Etherian biology and culture with desperate intensity. 3 days had passed since Vesa's midnight confession, and she'd been avoiding him with professional precision ever since. The more he learned about her people, the more her words haunted him. Etherians lived for 5 centuries. There, minds capable of storing and sharing memories across generations through something called the collective resonance. Most disturbing of all was their documented emotional detachment clinical studies showed the experienced feelings at roughly 10% the intensity of humans. Yet, Vesa had sat in his room, trembling, telling him he made her feel. Working. Late again, Jensen? Kai spun around to find Commander Torres approaching with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. The station's leader was a weathered woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and perceptive. Just catching up on some research, Kai said, quickly minimizing the screen. Torres handed him a cup and settled into the adjacent chair. Research on our Etherian observer, by any chance? Heat flooded Kai's face. I don't know what you mean. Son, I've been running colonies for 15 years. I know when there's tension between my people. She gestured toward the now blank screen. Dr. Vesa requested access to historical human Etherian contact records yesterday. Same files you're reading. Kai's pulse quickened. She did? Specifically, she wanted everything we had on the Proxima incident from 2087. Torres studied his reaction carefully. You know anything about that? The name meant nothing to him, but something in Torres' tone suggested it should. No, ma'am. Torres activated her own terminal, pulling up a heavily redacted file. 200 years ago, long before the formal exchange programs, a human survey ship encountered an Etherian vessel in distress near Proxima Centauri. Solar radiation had damaged their ship's shielding, would have killed the entire crew. Kai leaned forward, captivated despite himself. One member of the human crew, an engineer named Gavian Cross, figured out how to jury-rig their shield generators. Using human technology, saved 43 Etherian lives. Torres paused, meeting his eyes. Cross died in the process. Radiation exposure. Why would Vesa be interested in that? Because, Torres said quietly, according to her request logs, she's been researching Davian Cross for the past 6 months. Ever since she arrived. The coffee cup slipped from Kai's nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. That's impossible. Is it? Torres pulled up another file, A grainy photograph of a man in an old-style EVA suit. Even through the helmet's reflection, the face was unmistakably familiar. The same dark hair, the same strong jawline, the same eyes that stared back at Kai from mirrors. "Jesus," he whispered, "the resemblance is remarkable." Torres agreed. "I'd say impossible, except Ethrians don't believe in coincidences. Their whole culture is built around patterns, connections, destiny." Before Kai could respond, the door chimed. Vesa entered, stopping short when she saw them both. Her composure cracked for just a moment, violet eyes widening as she took in the files on the screen. "Commander Torres, Kai." Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I was not aware you were researching historical records." "Seems we're all interested in the same history," Torres said, standing. "I'll leave you too. To discuss ... patterns." She squeezed Kai's shoulder as she passed. "Some things are bigger than protocol, son. Don't forget that." The silence stretched between them after Torres left. Vesa remained by the door, as if ready to flee, while Kai stared at the photograph of his doppelganger. "You've seen this before," he said finally. "Yes. How long have you known?" Vesa moved closer, her movements careful and deliberate. "I have carried the memory of Davian Cross since I was young. It was passed to me through the resonance of memory from my ancestor Lyavissa, who was aboard that ship. A memory," Kai repeated slowly, "of a man who died 200 years ago. Among my people, significant events create ... echoes, moments of great sacrifice. Love or loss leave impressions that can be shared across generations." She stood behind the chair Torres had vacated, gripping its back. "The memory of Davian. Cross saving our people is sacred to us." Kai turned to face her fully. "And I look like him." "You are identical to him." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "When I first saw your colony application photo, I thought it was some kind of test. A cruel joke from the observation course. So you came here to what? Study me? Figure out if I'm some kind of reincarnation?" Color flooded her luminescent cheeks, a reaction he'd never seen from any Ethrian. "I came here because I could not stay away. The moment I saw your face, every rational thought I possessed abandoned me. I requested this assignment against all protocol, told lies to my superiors, compromised my entire career." She moved around the chair, stopping just out of arm's reach. "I came here because for 2 centuries I have been dreaming of a dead human, and suddenly he was alive again." The raw emotion in her voice struck him like a physical blow. Without thinking, he stood and closed the distance between them. This. Close, he could see the subtle patterns of light that moved beneath her skin, could feel the warmth radiating from her body. "Vesa," he said softly. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she seemed completely vulnerable. "I know it is impossible. I know it defies all logic. But when I look at you, I feel connected to something larger than myself, as if I have been searching for you my entire life." Unable to resist any longer, Kai reached out and cupped her face. In his hands, her skin was impossibly soft, warm like silk that held starlight. The moment their skin made contact, something electric passed between them, a sensation like diving into warm water, like coming home after a long journey. Vesa gasped, her eyes widening as the psychic connection formed between them. Suddenly, Kai could feel her emotions as if they were his own centuries of longing, confusion, and a love so deep it transcended species and time. "By the stars," she whispered, her hands coming up to cover his. "You feel it too." The connection was overwhelming, beautiful and terrifying all at once. Through it, he caught flashes of images, a ship in distress, a man working frantically with unfamiliar technology, the moment of sacrifice that had echoed through time. "I see him," Kai breathed. "I can see Davian." Vessa's eyes filled with tears. That sparkled like liquid crystal. How is this possible? Before he could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed them in red as Commander Torres' voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have incoming solar activity. This is not a drill." They broke apart, the spell shattered but not broken. As they rushed toward the door, Vessa caught his arm. "Kai," she said urgently, "whatever this connection is between us, whatever brought you here, I believe we are meant to face what comes next together." He nodded, understanding without words that their story was just beginning. Whatever force had brought them together across time and space, it wasn't finished with them yet. As they ran toward the emergency stations, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that history was about to repeat itself, and this time he might not survive it either. The emergency lasted 18 hours. By the time the solar storm passed and systems returned to normal, Kai and Visa had worked side by side through the crisis, their newfound connection making them unnaturally efficient as a team. Now, in the quiet aftermath, they found themselves alone in Kai's quarters again, this time by mutual agreement. Vessa sat cross-legged on his bed, her eyes closed in deep concentration. The Etherian meditation pose allowed her to access deeper layers of the collective resonance, memories buried so deep they felt like dreams. "Tell me about him," Kai said softly from his chair. "About Davian." Her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim light. He was brilliant, passionate about his work, but also deeply compassionate. The kind of human who would risk everything for strangers. She paused, studying his face. "Like you did during the storm, when you went into the radiation zone to repair the shield generators manually." Kai shifted uncomfortably. The parallel wasn't lost on him. He'd made the same choice Davian had, without hesitation. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Vessa said firmly. "They would not. I have studied hundreds of humans, Kai. Most are good people, but few possess that particular combination of technical brilliance and selfless courage." She moved to kneel beside his chair, her hands resting on the armrests. The casual intimacy of the gesture would have been unthinkable just days ago. "May I show you?" she asked. "Through the resonance, I can share the memories directly." Kai nodded, and Vessa placed her palms against his temples. The world dissolved around them suddenly. He was aboard an Etherian vessel, but seeing it through different eyes. The ship was dying, systems failing one by one as solar radiation cooked the crew alive. Panic filled the air, not the controlled fear of his own people, but something deeper, more primal. "We're losing hull integrity on decks 7 through 12. Someone reported in the musical Etherian language that Kai somehow understood. "Emergency power is down to 8%, came another voice. Through it all, a human figure moved with calm determination. Davian Cross, wearing a jury-rigged radiation suit, worked frantically at an Etherian control panel. His hands moved with impossible precision, as if he'd been born to understand their technology. "This should work," Davian said in accented Etherian, his voice tight with concentration. "But someone needs to manually route the power through the secondary grid. It's a one-way trip." The Etherian captain, a female with silver markings along her temples, stared at him in horror. "You cannot. The radiation levels. I know." Davian's smile was gentle, sad, but absolutely certain. "Take care of each other." The memory shifted, showing Davian's final moments as he manually activated the shield generators. The radiation hit him in waves, but he held his position until the last connection was made. As the ship's shields flared to life, saving 43 souls, Davian Cross collapsed, his sacrifice complete. The last image was of a young Etherian Laia Vessa's ancestor kneeling beside Davian's still form, her hand on his chest as his final breath left him. The look of profound loss and gratitude on her face burned itself into the memory, to be passed down through generations. Kai gasped as the vision ended, tears streaming down his face. The emotions were overwhelming, not just the memory of Davian's sacrifice, but the centuries of longing that had followed, passed from mother to daughter through the collective resonance. "Now you understand," Vesa whispered, her own cheeks wet with tears. "For 200 years, my people have honored his memory, and for all my life, I have dreamed of him. But I'm not him," Kai said, though even as he spoke the words, doubt crept in. The way Davian had moved, the intuitive understanding of Etherian technology, it had felt familiar, like remembering something long forgotten. Vesa's hand slid down to frame his face. "Perhaps not, but you share more than his appearance." Her thumb traced his cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "Today, when the shields failed, you knew exactly what to do. You understood our technology instinctively, moved through our systems as if you'd worked with them your entire life." "That's impossible, is it?" She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching his. "Among my people, we believe souls are eternal. They move between lives, between bodies, sometimes even between species. Love, sacrifice, unfinished business, these things create bonds that transcend death." Kai's hands found her waist, pulling her closer. The psychic connection hummed between them, stronger now, filled with emotions too complex to name. "If that's true," he said quietly, "if I am somehow connected to Davian, what does that mean for us?" "It means," Vesa said, her lips barely an inch from his, "that I have been waiting lifetimes to find you again." The kiss that followed was electric, charged with 2 centuries of longing and the desperate relief of connection finally fulfilled. Kai had kissed women before, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of kissing someone whose mind was partially open to his own. Every sensation was doubled, every emotion amplified. Vesa's hands tangled in his hair as she deepened the kiss, her body pressing against his with surprising urgency. The careful control she'd maintained for months crumbled completely, replaced by raw need and desperate affection. "I need you," she whispered against his lips, the words carrying the weight of centuries. "I have needed you for so long." Kai stood, lifting her with him, and she wrapped her legs around his waist with fluid grace. The few steps to his bed felt like crossing universes. As he laid her down gently, the soft luminescence of her skin created patterns of light and shadow across the small room. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough with desire and concern. The protocols, the potential consequences, everything they'd built their professional relationship on was about to be shattered. In response, Vesa pulled him down to her hands exploring the planes of his chest with reverent wonder. "I have never been certain of anything in my life," she said, "except this." Their love-making was a revelation tender and desperate by turns, filled with the psychic echoes of their connection. Through their bond, Kai experienced not just his own sensations, but hers as well, creating a feedback loop of pleasure and emotion that left them both trembling and overwhelmed. Afterward, they lay entwined in the narrow bed, Vesa's head on his chest as her fingers traced lazy patterns on his skin. The luminescence of her body had dimmed to a soft glow, like moonlight on water. "The genetic scans," she said suddenly, her voice thoughtful. "What about them?" "As part of the observation protocol, I've been monitoring your DNA patterns. There are anomalies markers that don't match typical human genetics." She lifted her head to look at him. "I thought they were simply mutations, but now you think they might be something else?" "I think," Vesa said carefully, "that you were chosen for this assignment for reasons neither of us understood. Someone knew about the connection. Someone wanted us to find each other." A chill ran down Kai's spine. The Colonial Authority? Or someone higher up. The genetic markers in your DNA, they're not random mutations, Kai. They're modifications. Deliberate changes made before your birth. The implications were staggering. If she was right, then his entire life had been orchestrated, guided toward this moment, this connection. There's more, Vesa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The modifications aren't just random genetic changes. They're designed to enhance psychic compatibility with Etherian minds. Someone has been preparing you for this. Before Kai could respond, his personal communicator chimed with an urgent message from Commander Torres. As he read it, his blood turned to ice. What is it? Vesa asked, sitting up in alarm. Another solar storm, Kai said grimly. Category 5 this time. Big enough to overwhelm our shields completely. He met her eyes, seeing his own fear reflected there. Big enough to kill everyone on the station. As alarms began to wail throughout the colony, Kai realized that his moment of choice had arrived. Just like Davian 2 centuries ago, he was about to face a situation where heroism and sacrifice might be the only options. This time, though, he wouldn't face it alone. The command center buzzed with desperate activity as Colony Station Epsilon 7 prepared for the worst solar storm in recorded history. Holographic displays showed the massive coronal ejection racing toward them. A wall of radiation and electromagnetic fury that would arrive in less than 6 hours. Current shield strength won't hold, reported Lieutenant Chun, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. We're looking at total system failure within the first hour of impact. Commander Torres stood at the central console, her weathered face grim. Evacuation options? None, ma'am. The transport ships can't launch in these solar winds, and the emergency bunkers won't protect against this level of radiation. Kai entered the command center with Vesa close behind, still feeling the afterglow of their intimate connection despite the crisis. Several crew members shot curious glances at the unprecedented sight of the Etherian observer in the restricted area, but Torres waved off their concerns. Good, you're both here, the commander said. We need every brilliant mind we can get. Standard protocols aren't going to save us this time. As the team reviewed their limited options, Kai found himself staring at the storm data with a strange sense of déjà vu. The energy patterns, the radiation signatures, something about them felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. What if we don't try to block the storm? He said suddenly. The room fell silent. Torres raised an eyebrow. Come again? The Etherian ship 2 centuries ago. They survived because Davian didn't just reinforce their shields. He redirected energy. Kai moved to the main display, his hands flying over the controls with instinctive precision. What if we could channel the storm's energy instead of fighting it? Vesa stepped beside him, her eyes bright with understanding. The station's power grid could be modified to create a dispersal field. Instead of taking the impact directly, we could spread it across a wider area. That's theoretically possible, admitted Chun, but the modifications would require someone to manually recalibrate the primary generators. In the middle of the storm, with zero radiation shielding, the unspoken truth hung in the air. It would be a suicide mission. I'll do it, Kai said without hesitation. Absolutely not. Torres's voice brooked no argument. I won't sacrifice crew. Members on a theory. It's not a theory, Vesa interjected, her voice carrying an odd note of certainty. It will work. I have seen it work before. All eyes turned to her. What do you mean? Torres asked. Vesa looked directly at Kai, her violet eyes intense. Show them, she said softly. Show them what you really are. Understanding flowed between them through their psychic bond. Kai moved to an auxiliary console, one designed for Etherian technology interfaces. The moment his hands touched the foreign controls, something awakened in his mind knowledge that wasn't his own, understanding. That transcended his human education doubt. The console responded to his touch as if he'd been using it his entire life. Complex Etherian equations flowed across the screen. Calculations that should have taken hours completed in minutes. Around the command center, crew members stared in shock as their human engineer interfaced seamlessly with alien technology. "That's impossible," Sean whispered. "Humans can't operate Etherian systems without extensive training." "Kai is not entirely human," Vesa said quietly. "The genetic modifications in his DNA, they weren't random experiments. Someone has been preparing him for this moment since before his birth." Torres stepped forward, her expression hard. "Explain." Now, Vesa took a deep breath. "There are factions within both our species that believe in guided evolution. Secret groups that have been working to create individuals capable of bridging the gap between human and Etherian consciousness. Kai is the result of that program." "A hybrid?" Torres's voice was carefully neutral. "Not genetically, but his neural patterns have been modified to accept Etherian psychic imprints. The soul of Davian Cross, his memories, his knowledge, his instinctive understanding of our technology. It was never truly gone. It was waiting for the right vessel." Kai felt the truth of her words resonating in his bones. The dreams he'd dismissed, the inexplicable knowledge, the way Etherian technology felt familiar, it all made sense now. "Which brings us back to the immediate problem," he said, his voice steady despite the revelation. "I can modify the generators to channel the storm, but I need to be physically present to make the adjustments as the energy levels fluctuate." "The radiation will kill you," Torres said bluntly. "Maybe, but without the modification, it'll kill all of us." Kai turned to Vesa, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. "There might be another way, though. If our psychic bond is strong enough, Vesa could maintain a connection with me during the procedure. Etherian mental disciplines might be enough to keep me functional through the worst of it." Vesa nodded slowly. "It's possible, but the psychic strain would be enormous, and if something goes wrong, we'd both die," Kai finished. "I know." The command center fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Finally, Torres spoke. "The Colonial Authority is going to have some very pointed questions about all of this," she said dryly, "assuming we survive to answer them." "Ma'am?" Chun looked confused. "Hidden experiments, psychic connections, genetic modifications. This is way above my pay grade." Torres straightened, her command presence reasserting itself. "But right now, my job is to keep this colony alive. If our resident miracle worker thinks he can save us, I'm not going to stop him." She turned to address the room. "All personnel, prepare for Emergency Protocol 7. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or completely insane." As the crew scattered to prepare, Vesa caught Kai's arm. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The psychic bond we'll need to maintain it. It will make our connection permanent, irreversible. Our minds will be linked for the rest of our hour. Lives." Kai cupped her face in his hands, memorizing every detail of her luminescent features. "Is that what you want?" "I have wanted nothing else since the moment I saw you," she whispered. "But you need to understand, if we do this, you'll never be fully human again. The Etherian consciousness will become part of you permanently, and you'll never be able to return to your old life either." Kai pointed out. "Your people will consider you contaminated by human emotion." Vesa smiled, the expression transforming her face. "Then we'll be outcasts together." Their kiss was fierce, desperate, filled with the knowledge that they were about to risk everything on an impossible plan. Around them, the station prepared for the storm of the century. But in that moment, they were the only two people in the universe. "Whatever happens out there," Kai whispered against her lips, "know that I love you. Not because of some ancient connection or genetic manipulation, but because you're you." Because you chose to feel your entire species told you not to. And I love you, Vesa replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the same reason. I loved Davian Cross 2 centuries ago. Because when faced with impossible choices, you always choose to save others. As the first edges of the solar storm reached the planet's atmosphere, Kai suited up for what might be his final mission. But unlike Davian Cross, he wouldn't face the radiation alone. Through their bond, he carried Vesa's strength with him, and she carried his courage. Together, they were about to discover if love really could transcend death itself. The generator complex hummed with ominous energy as the solar storm's leading edge struck Colony Station Epsilon 7. Kai stood before the primary power coupling, his hands steady despite the radiation already beginning to cook the air around him. Through his helmet's display, he could see the energy readings climbing toward lethal levels. Psychic link established, Vesa's voice came through his com, though he could feel her presence more clearly through their mental connection. She was in the shielded control room 50 meters away, but she might as well have been standing beside him. I can feel your heartbeat, Kai. Your fear, your determination. The fear's getting stronger, he admitted, beginning the first sequence of modifications to the generator array. The Etherian-inspired equations flowed through his mind like half-remembered songs, Davian's knowledge guiding his hands. But so is the certainty that this will work. Through their bond, Vesa fed him. Strength and focus, her Etherian mental discipline, helping him maintain concentration as radiation levels spiked. But he could feel the strain on her as well, the psychic effort required to maintain their connection across this distance, through this chaos, was enormous. First coupling modified, Kai reported, sweat beading inside his helmet despite the environmental controls. Moving to Generator 2. The storm hit with full force just as he reached the second generator. Reality turned white-hot as electromagnetic fury washed over the station. Alarms screamed, systems overloaded, and for a terrifying moment, Kai thought they'd miscalculated. Then the modified generators kicked in. Instead of trying to resist the storm's power, they channeled it, dispersing the massive energy across a network of conductors that spread the impact over hundreds of square kilometers. The station shuddered and groaned, but held. It's working. Chon's voice crackled over the comb. Energy levels are stabilizing, but Kai barely heard her. The radiation was taking its toll, and even with Vesa's psychic support, his body was beginning to fail. His vision blurred, and he stumbled against the third generator housing. Kai! Vesa's mental voice was sharp with panic. Your life signs are dropping. You need to get out of there. 2 more generators, he gasped, forcing himself upright. Almost done. Through their bond, he felt Vesa make a decision that terrified him. She was going to risk everything, opening their psychic connection completely, letting their consciousness merge to give him the strength to finish. Vesa, no, he protested. If you burn out your mind, then we burn out together, she said firmly. I will not lose you again. The full merger hit him like lightning. Suddenly, Kai wasn't just drawing on Vesa's strength. He was experiencing her memories, her emotions, her very essence. 2 centuries of longing, the weight of carrying Davian's memory, the joy of finding Kai, the terror of potentially losing him. It all flooded through him at once, but with it came power. Etherian mental disciplines that no human had ever mastered. Psychic techniques refined over millennia. The collective wisdom of an entire species flowing through their bond. Kai's hands moved with inhuman precision as he completed the final modifications. The generators sang in harmony, their combined output creating a perfect dispersal field that turned the solar storm's destructive power into something almost beautiful, streams of controlled energy that painted the sky in brilliant auroras. Modification complete, he whispered, then collapsed. Consciousness came and went in waves. Kai was dimly aware of being carried to the medical bay, of concerned voices discussing radiation poisoning and cellular damage. But stronger than any of that was Vessa's presence in his mind, her will keeping him anchored to life when his body wanted to give up. "The neural activity is off the charts," he heard Dr. Patterson saying. "It's like his brain is running on overdrive, but not in a way that makes medical sense." "It is the bond," Vessa's voice, though she sounded exhausted. "Our minds are sharing the burden of keeping his body functional while it heals." "That's impossible," Patterson protested. "Humans don't have that kind of psychic capability." "He is no longer entirely human," Vessa said simply. When Kai finally opened his eyes fully, 3 days had passed. The first thing he saw was Vessa's face, pale and drawn from the effort of maintaining their connection, but smiling with relief. "Hello," she said softly. "Hello yourself." His voice was hoarse, but steady. "Did we save everyone?" "Everyone," she confirmed. The dispersal field worked perfectly. The storm passed with minimal damage to the station. Kai tried to sit up and found that the simple movement sent ripples through their psychic bond. He could feel Vessa's emotions as clearly as his own, could sense her thoughts dancing at the edges of his consciousness. The merger hadn't been temporary. They were permanently linked now, 2 minds sharing one expanded awareness. "How do you feel about that?" Vessa asked, sensing his realization. Kai considered the question seriously. The loss of mental privacy was profound, but so was the gain. He could feel Vessa's love for him as a constant, warm presence. Her knowledge, her memories, her very essence had become part of him, just as his had become part of her. "Complete," he said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." Commander Torres entered the medical bay, followed by a woman Kai didn't recognize, tall, severe-looking, wearing the insignia of Colonial Authority Intelligence. "Agent Morrison," Torres said grimly. "She has some questions about recent events." Morrison stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Jensen, Dr. Vessa, I represent certain interests within both the Colonial Authority and the Etherian Council. We need to discuss your unique situation." "The genetic modifications," Kai said. It wasn't really a question. "Among other things, the program that created you was highly classified, so classified that most participants didn't know they were involved. Your parents volunteered for what they thought was a routine genetic screening. The modifications to your DNA were made without their knowledge." Vessa's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "And now?" "Now you're both living proof that human Etherian integration is not only possible, but potentially revolutionary." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "There are factions on both sides that would see you as either the future of interspecies cooperation or a dangerous threat to species purity. What does that mean for us?" Kai asked. "It means you have choices to make. You could return to Earth, be studied, help us understand how to replicate the bond you've achieved, or ... Morrison paused. "There's a joint exploration mission being assembled. Deep space, long duration, specifically looking for worlds where both species could coexist. They could use someone with your unique capabilities." Kai looked at Vessa, their mental connection allowing for a conversation no outside observer could follow. In seconds, they discussed possibilities, fears, hopes, and dreams. The bond that had saved the colony now offered them a future neither could have imagined alone. "We'll take the exploration mission," Vessa said aloud. "Together." Morrison nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. "I thought you might. The ship launches in 6 months. That gives you time to adjust to your new circumstances." After Morrison left, Kai and Vessa found themselves alone in the medical bay. The enormity of what had happened, what they'd become, was still sinking in. Any regrets? Kai asked. Vesa smiled, the expression radiant. Only that it took 2 centuries to find you again. Through their bond, Kai felt the truth of her words, the depth of emotion that spanned lifetimes. Whether he was truly Davian Cross reborn, or simply someone shaped by forces beyond his understanding, didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the love they'd built together, the connection that had saved not just their lives, but opened possibilities neither species had imagined. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Vesa said, moving closer until their foreheads touched, we explore the universe together. 2 minds, 1 heart, infinite possibilities. Their kiss was gentle this time, filled not with desperate passion, but with the quiet certainty of forever. Around them, Colony Station Epsilon 7 hummed with renewed life, its systems stronger for having weathered the storm dot, and in the depths of space, new worlds waited to be discovered by 2 souls who had found each other across impossible distances, proving that some bonds truly were stronger than death, deeper than species, and more enduring than time itself. Outside the medical bay windows, the last auroras from the solar storm painted the sky in brilliant colors, nature's celebration of love triumphant, and destiny fulfilled. Their story was just beginning.